Imagine being banned for a joke. I also want to preface this with two things. This can happen to literally anything, including other kids' games, and it is unavoidable because it is inherently in human nature to be negative as well as positive. In 2005, a Flash MMO game was created called Webkinz, a plush toy attached by the leg or wing or whatever, with a sealed code containing a string of 8 characters you then enter into the corresponding website where your plush toy comes to life online in a virtual house with virtual activities for you to do every single day. It's pretty much Animal Crossing, which I'm playing a lot of at the moment, except with way more control over anything, except certain things. They stopped making plush toys in 2019 because sales weren't meeting expectations, and they were also in the middle of developing their desktop application to help the game survive after Flash loses support at the end of this year. The desktop app, by the way, is just as flawed as the main experience is, being used with Adobe Air somehow to wrap the SWF files that Webkinz uses on the browser in a format that doesn't have to be read through a browser, so the same flaws that exist on the browser version exist in the desktop application as well, as they are reading from the same file pool. Though, there are two main problems with the application itself. The application is only full screen. This is especially egregious given that the browser version has to accommodate for existing resolutions as it is, and I have played this game on much smaller laptop screens, and there have been no cutoffs, so there is no excuse why there can't be a list of preset resolutions to choose from for a windowed mode, considering we're in the year 2020, not 2005, when games went full screen. I realize it is Flash, but again, I shall repeat, you can currently play it on really small screens and it accommodates for it, so there's no excuse. The other issue is if you are someone who runs multiple accounts for purposes of trading and dailies among other things, the program has no options to fully boot you unless you restart the program, which is 2 loading screens before it takes over your entire screen, forcing you to Alt-Tab if you want to look at anything else, which, given the site still heavily uses other mediums attached to the game, such as its news site and browsers, codes handed out in YouTube videos that you have to clumsily press Alt-Tab for every single time, if you don't want to or cannot purchase a second monitor for the purposes of actually using your computer while playing a video game, which plenty of other games understand, so Webkinz has no excuse not to follow. I still play the game nowadays because I enjoy the character and item design. The items in your room are pre-rendered 3D objects modeled and then potentially animated, then place as things in your room that your pet can potentially interact with. The pets were originally going to be 3D models, according to the screenshot, if it's legitimate, and this would make sense because nowadays they're rigged by several in-game skeletons moving their limbs like paper dolls to put an equivalent to, much like 3D models have bones for a skeleton. The art style and direction has changed and also remained around the same for a while, and this is why I continue to play the game, despite that I'm also an extremely huge plushie fan myself, and the plushes themselves are of decent enough quality for them to last this long. But many other people surrounding this game are very questionable individuals. People who promote toxic positivity without realizing how utterly dangerous it is to the game at large, never mind its floundering reputation because of lack of proper information on the internet even now in 2020. Thousands of users on the site are under the impression that Flash losing support means it'll just delete from people's computers. These are the types of people that run every single fan community surrounding the game, and I wouldn't be surprised if in part its floundering reputation is due to the types of people that still hang around this game promoting this toxic positivity because it's extremely problematic. The game is very heavily flawed. That's okay, as I showed in the last video. It is completely impossible for an American account to be chatting to an Asian account within that period of time. That is literally the entire day! Because he's gonna bug me for 2 minutes. I will come back to this, but this is also broken. If I do not complete this, a little bit of his happiness will go down and this will not go up. It is impossible to clear, and there is no way to stop it unless you switch to another pet. And in that case, the happiness will still go down. It's very easy to put back up, and you can wait for another quest, but the fact that they even ask this is stupid. I was anticipating getting this particular request. So here you go. Here's proof that Webkinz themselves do not test their game because they do not understand the idea that every single possibility must reach its conclusion. This game is very bugged. There are programming flaws, outdated assets, and outdated things functionality-wise all across the site, especially with their customer service being very unresponsive to any errors that occur beyond people tripping on buttons that are extremely obvious. And this is why the hosts in the various areas in the game have to drone on with the tutorials every single time surrounding their gameplay every time you go there, because this is the audience this game attracts, the airheads who don't pay attention to literally anything, in my opinion. Now, there is a legitimate reason why they repeat themselves all the time there, don't get me wrong, but these are factors that turn regular internet users away that have the critical thinking to be able to stay away a little bit. Several YouTube videos show people with misconceptions about the game from not reading the obvious FAQ section on their site, which I do before I properly browse any site now, purely for the fact that I need to know how websites operate. As my history with Webkinz was, I learned of it in December of 2007, but I was never able to purchase one until March of 2008. The time in between, I was forced to look at the FAQ section on the site to understand any semblance of how the site is supposed to work, as I don't think I would know everything from a store clerk who's read nothing but a basic synopsis. This contributes to the rumors, which are rumored to have affected why they removed Dr. Quack from the game and now leave him as a Twitter account where they can repost outdated memes long after they're dead, which contributes to misinformation, which is why the game, beyond the fact that to most people it was just a fad, suffers to this day. Nowadays, the staff on the game side appears to have changed a lot, to the point they only make digital-only pets and can only make pets within the limited amount of skeletons they have now because of the fact they're on a budget. Ads constantly plague the game now, not on the desktop version yet, but they'll find some way to implement them eventually, I'm sure of it. There are frequent posts on their blog and in the advertisements on the site advertising promotional packs for tons of money for pets and items that come free if you purchase hundreds of thousands of their site currency, which you have to purchase using real money in an extremely obtuse manner to someone unfamiliar with the site, and they constantly shill it during their podcasts and basically any mention of the game now. Now, of course, we all know why this is. When Webkinz became popular, they tried following their audience, but they came out with so many pets that it became unfeasible. There are currently within the site's code entries for 1,300 pets. Around 500 of those pets were made into plush versions, the remainder being special pets they made purely for promotion or just for sale for $10 on their in-game store. They entered a deal where they started making signature pets, special plushes made with higher quality materials and special gifts upon adoption. The higher quality plush supposedly was to follow their rapidly growing audience. Signatures were respected for a while, even to this day, but then they stopped making them. It also doesn't help that with the higher quality they were also more expensive, probably more so for Gans considering the amount of money they poured into it. And the years since followed quietly. This was also around when I took a break from the site because high school was getting more intense, although I still enjoyed the site and will keep perking my account back up so that when I'm out of school I could come back and play it again with a fresher mindset. The years after 2013 didn't really follow with any major updates until Webkinz X. Webkinz X was a grand overhaul of the site's code from ActionScript 2 to 3, and every single item and pet had to be converted to new skeletons and portraits. From what I read, the transition was a mess, and some objects are still broken or missing functionality that they used to have in the old version of the site, such as the ability to animate. For a long time, pets couldn't watch TV, and now they still kinda can't. You can only roleplay that the TVs are on now in a pet's room instead of actually being able to view the old TV shows they used to make for them. The TV shows used to provide comedy for the Monkey and Monkey shows, tips on recipes for cooking with an appliance, and they appear to run contests so that videos made in the Webkinz studio, which you can buy all these actors and sets for in the actual game, could actually be made into a TV show for others to watch. The winner of that contest is the show on the Winners Shows area. The last major update to the game that involved the house itself, as I would imagine since that's the majority of customization you're going to be doing and it's the first thing you load into now, it is the core of Webkinz itself, in my opinion, was being able to move rooms around the house freely. With Webkinz X, they removed the ability to visit your friends' houses due to the fact the room code is not coordinate based in regards to which room is next to another one, and as described on the technical reports on the blog site, they had to sort of tape together the moving room code to the house code as it stands instead of overhauling it, because that would be very unfeasible in this day and age for the company given the hundreds of thousands of rooms that could exist in their servers. There are 23,000 items in the game now. A large portion of those items are clothing and therefore are not on the room since they're rigged to the flash skeletons of the pets themselves, but there are thousands of ways to customize a room. The game recently got hacked on raid forums through the parents area, which has remained unupdated for literally a decade. The only functionality it provides to the site is being able to turn off the ads and enable KinzChat Plus if you are not a free member, so in essence it was held by duct tape and then easily hacked. One user on a forum, Webkinz Insider Aspidistra, shares similar thoughts to myself after finding out the news it was hacked. Here was their post. For security purposes, during the archiving process, we remove all information associated to the account other than username and password, the company said. Please note that if an account remains inactive for a period of 7 years, Webkinz will then delete that account. At the time of writing, it is unclear if hackers have stolen these archived accounts or if the leaked data belongs to currently active users. It has amazed me that Webkinz spends so much time, effort, and money churning out eStore things while the site is still buggy, things from Webkinz X are still broken, and a lot of the news site is abandoned or outdated. If you go to the customer service form online and fill it out, you can put in all your info, email, computer platform issue, what browser you use, and then type your whole issue and you'll get an error screen that says you forgot to fill out some section that's required. This isn't the case, and this is a classic shout out to hackers who are looking for sites who don't keep things updated, don't notice small issues that could have been put there on purpose to see if it is fixed. This is asking for problems and makes the site a target. I have sent dozens and dozens of letters to Webkinz over the past year plus trying to explain this to them. I have spent decades working as a community producer and security and software engineer for so many sites I can't even list them. I even snail mailed letters to them in Canada with many details that you wouldn't put online or an email to a company. All was ignored. This isn't to toot my own horn, it's meant to remark that I'm surprised this hasn't happened sooner, and in the past there have been rumors it has. As soon as a company purges names and members or has database resets, this is common. As soon as you publicly whine to your members that you might have to close the site because Flash is ending, I don't know of any game sites, even if they did crash and burn, who are telling people how horrible it all was for them, how much work it was, and maybe they can't do it when it's a matter of changing to another coding and everyone has done it long ago. When you don't fix things that you promised you'd fix in a few months and it looks like a company doesn't have the resources or care to do so, you ask for trouble. They are minding the eStore but not updating or fixing the site. Many of us have had bad gateway errors on news. Many have things from Webkinz X that are still gone. Anyone who plays is fed up with broken parties and all the interactive things that ended and are gone. I don't go around making trouble for sites, but I spent a lot of years looking to see who could, and all you have to do is spend a few weeks on Webkinz to see they have lousy programming at times, don't keep up with current standards, and like to pretend they don't have anything to fix, update, or replace. They also don't have 23 million members, so I suspect these names are from the old database and were released by a disgruntled ex-employee or customer service person. Most of the big hacks in the last several years were done this way. I was intrigued that on one article I read about this, an actual screenshot was taken of the exact warning that pulls up when this exploit is found in the game. How did this person get this screenshot? Either someone sent it to them or they were able to do it themselves. Since the article was written after this breach was fixed, then they had to have it before it went public, meaning it isn't any big secret this can be done. If it was fixed so fast, then I'm puzzled why Webkinz never found it themselves, because this is the basic stuff you look for, especially when the site is buggy. Contests don't run smoothly, floaties don't fly, hosts don't show up, or the site is down for some reason. The first thing you think of is, was it an attack or attempted on, and you fix it. I am so sorry if anyone ends up having consequences for this. Change your passwords. I want to add an addendum that the file definitely was recent, because several years ago I did not have certain accounts with the game. The file containing it had those accounts listed, so the hack happened extremely recently. They then describe potential methods passwords could have been stolen via phishing and having similar email addresses across multiple websites, but I want to bring up a very important point. Most of what they say here is correct. The game to this day remains heavily non-functional in many ways, a few of which I described in my previous video. Every single bug I have come across on the site I either write out in excruciating detail with a picture, or I record myself going into the game with these errors to show to them. Even minor issues plaguing the site, such as limbs on the pets being misplaced, miscolored, or straight up vanishing, fully recorded and edited, have gone fully ignored in each subsequent update as they continue to add bucket loads of items and one-time NPCs to the game to pad it out for years and years. The customer support is extremely unhelpful unless you're literally not following the tutorials the site provides you with in the first place. Which, given the general age range of the people playing this game, which is roughly late teens to early 20s to scattered age ranges beyond that point going all the way up to grandmothers who still play, is remarkably silly. The game continues to remain flawed due to their lack of response. Even before the current situation that shall not be named, I emailed them a detailed report about a broken mission on their site that contained a picture and detailing exactly what I did. They automatically cleared the mission for me, despite that my criteria for 100%ing the mission had not been met because they could not be met for the reasons I emailed about it, and then they refused to fix it for 10 months while they harassed my account believing it's a problem purely with my version of the game because nobody else reports on these things. Then when they gave a week of free QA testing for everybody on this exact same mission and they start getting responses from people on Facebook, only then do they change their tone in subsequent messages to my email account saying they might fix it at some unknown point in the future. All of my other messages, including the previous ones where I went over the Clubhouse time zone problem, have been ignored and dismissed as simply problems with my game despite my attempt to provide picture and video proof that it is not. There is a difference when it's them in the podcast shilling the game despite obvious gambling attempts.
The only thing that you can do is win Kin's Cash here, but
it's just fun to watch.
And literally scamming you out of your money, like in the mission part, because they are paid by the company to do this. It is extremely sleazy. The tone of Aspidistro's message would give that right away immediately. I play the game for different reasons, however we still acknowledge the flaws with it because we are customers trying to improve the state of things. However, this doesn't ring true for the other communities surrounding the game at large. Roughly in 2008 and 2009, Webkinz themselves created a blog to promote and talk about the game called Webkinz News. It is here where they post all announcements relating to the game's upcoming events and promotions. If something is not posted there, it's posted on their respective Facebook pages for the store and the site, respectively. The site is under heavy moderation. You're heavily encouraged to only agree with the content of the article, and the formatting when you comment is laughably small, and the types of comments you find here are equivalent to YouTube and other site comments. Comments made with little regard for themselves. Now on the site, there's a level of acceptance for this, as little children are allowed to sign up for accounts and comment. So there's a higher degree of security, which makes sense, except in cases where you are clearly clarifying to people and you get censored, but they're paid to do this, however sleazy it is. This is not the case in the communities surrounding this game that feel the need to do the same. The first website I came across was the aforementioned Webkinz Insider, which you can't even join nowadays because the site is barely staying afloat due to the fact that the capture version used for the site deprecated in 2017 and all the Contact Us links on the site also require the same capture, and therefore because it doesn't show up yet it is still a required field, no user can actually join the site now. If you joined back then, that's all you have. You also cannot update your avatar and the forum is largely dead save for a few sections. The other websites which I have been to are filled to the brim with people promoting toxic positivity that also spell the end for this game's survival. It might look welcoming, but trust me, when we go down this rabbit hole you will find out they are far more toxic than you could ever believe, and in part, encouraged by the Webkinz News blog and misconceptions about why they like what they do, in some cases. The first I want to talk about is the Webkinz Reddit. Now I didn't hang around here much because I'm skeptical of Reddit as is, since I very much do not agree with the Splatoon one on literally anything and does get downvoted to high L for simply stating my opinion there as well, so I didn't expect much out of Reddit. Before I go any further, I want to state these sites are ridiculously hard to find for a child and are almost entirely comprised of adults, either young or old. If there are teenagers, that's as low as the bar goes. You can tell by the way they type, it is far more eloquent than a very young child would say in pretty much every instance. It's that, or they require you to be as young as a teenager to join. There was one incident where I wanted to trade with someone and they didn't want to trade. They wanted to give it, despite that my request was to trade. I had received a duplicate of an item that I had no idea what to do with, and it was another item in the same theme I was requesting, so I felt it was fair to request this. The economy in Webkinz for items is drastically shattered due to multiple factors. First of all, there are rare items and then there are rare items. The second rare is in quotes because on the site itself it will flag an item if you're trading what Gans considers to be a common item for a rare one, which is vastly subjective because items that you get from certain promotions are considered rare, as well as the rares in the curio shop that rotate in and out each day. However, there are items they put up on the site specific to an event related to the season that is only applicable for that particular year that are not considered rare. For instance, they will constantly release sets of clothing themed around the season each year. These are considered common items, despite that they are swapped out once 2 sets of seasons have passed and can never be purchased again. Yet they will run an event every so often called Bake Sale, where you collect certain pieces of themed food, apply them in certain combinations on appliances to receive furniture that you can then decorate your room with. These furniture pieces, due to coming from the food itself, are considered rare, despite that they consistently run these events every once in a while with repeats. The community is aware of this, and thus updates for the economy are not really valid because Gans will constantly re-release old items, changing their values all the time, and therefore there's no real definitive mark on what's rare or not, so it's purely subjective. However, usually, items within the same theme of items are typically fair play. There's also the fact of the matter that Kinz Chat Plus, even with its improvements, forgetting about the schedule for a moment, is not a good means to discuss why you want items or even why you want to trade with someone. If you refuse someone's request to trade, you can't trade with anyone in the room for an undisclosed amount of time, and if someone so much as sees your pet enter the room, you will immediately get pinged to trade, and there is no way to filter it. I've had people singing lyrics to themselves in the middle of the trade room, typed out, while I perilously try with the one friend I trust, anxiously waiting for if they'll ping me. Someone else tried to call me an asshole because I didn't want to trade with them and repeatedly called me rude for mistakenly sitting in the chair opposite of them to access the trading table I felt I wanted to access. They usually run events each month in maintenance on the today's activities, an area on the site that if you're really unsure what to do, you can wait usually every few hours and there'll be a large number of things such as increasing the payout of arcade games to various mini-games that can only be accessed using the area where you can earn prizes they rotate out with each maintenance they do to the site. This was where I obtained a duplicate of an item I had already obtained in a theme which I was looking to complete. Therefore, with no real need for the second item, I wanted to be rid of it. The person who responded to the claim just wanted to hand it to me, despite I wanted to be rid of the duplicate. Merely because I suggested that, they didn't want to hand the item to me, despite that I suggested a trade. But it gets worse. The two prime examples are Kinzcord and Webkinz Town. Kinzcord is a Discord server based around Webkinz as you would expect. From what I hear, one of the actual staff members is also in the Discord and has divulged many a secret about factoids of the site that are long since gone or not as much of a problem, such as the fact that Webkinz uses ActionScript, which was pretty expected for a game that uses Flash anyway. When I was there, it was during when the desktop application I mentioned before didn't exist, and we only heard about it as they very sparsely updated for us, which was very suspect given this was important to preserving the site in any way, so for it to be so delayed and silent was very disturbing. Also, check out this dumb excuse for why they've kept to the full screen only application in the year 2020. It's absolutely guaranteed to blow your entire brain out. No, the app only works in full screen mode. However, you can still minimize the app or access your toolbar by using several keyboard shortcuts. Just Google minimize full screen app to find instructions for your computer. Asking 6-year-olds to forcibly Google so you don't shill their entire screens. I should also mention that this article was one in a series of special reports with Steve Webkinz, I'm pretty sure that's not his real name, where this guy pretending to be a monkey goes on long explanations about the website. These are typically categorized on their news site, the only thing organized because their Kinzopedia is completely outdated and useless, so is their laughably bare forum, and this article in particular, you have to search their site for because they've hidden it from the general public, because how dare we actually show how flawed we are, Gans, you pretties. When the desktop application didn't exist, there was no download link, and thus one of the members was freaking out because they worried children wouldn't be able to find it. Given that at the same time the staff members on the news site have to moderate hundreds of comments a day and update the site with the newest events happening, it would be expected a download link wouldn't be put up immediately in 2019 while the browser version of the site was still alive and kicking, and therefore they could still use it. I entered into a discussion with this user assuring them that it would be extremely stupid for them to not add a link to the homepage when it gets closer, and nowadays there is a clear link to the desktop application despite that the play button for the browser is still there and up and functioning until they have literally none of their users able to use it, unless they have Pale Moon, which is said to keep Flash in the browser. That's sad. However, because I persisted because logically it wouldn't make any sense that the only link to their website's content wouldn't be present on the homepage in some capacity given how stringent they are that they really want the game to continue on, possibly because it's the only moneymaker they have that consistently sells in some capacity and it keeps them afloat. It would be asinine then if there were no link, however they repeatedly kept arguing out of fear they wouldn't put the link up. All of my messages were then deleted, and then I was forced into private messages with the admins who ran the server. These were not shills, by the way, and the staff member who's there wasn't there when I was in the server, so these were purely voluntary members forcing upon me that I must never argue with anyone, not even constructively, because it's too negative, and negativity is bad, despite that anyone with a brain would tell you that trying to stifle it creates more problems in the long term. This was shortly after I left the Chow server for being consistently ignored and lied to concerning the state of things, so I was very well aware of the consequences of this particular problem since they preached this rhetoric as well, and therefore I explained to them trying to stifle any negativity at all would create more problems in the long term for the server. I merely got a response indicating they might talk about it, but I never heard about it again, and they doubled down on their actions after that, leading me to believe I had been completely ignored once again. Things were relatively okay until I got scammed out of a code for a penguin. They typically only allowed legitimate sellers, and the code was attached and sealed when I received the penguin, but the code inside was not valid, likely either due to someone guessing it on the site as there is no in-game limit to prevent people from entering any random 8-character string to potentially adopt a pet they may not own, or because it probably expired given that the 8-character string is alphanumeric and codes typically cannot be reused, so because of the limited space, I would presume some would get reused later down the line and others get flagged as not valid. However, that's speculation. We got half of the money back from the seller as I still wanted the plush itself, however that barred me from purchasing anywhere from there again, and the final straw that broke the camel's back was an incident in the venting channel. One girl was playing Minecraft and lengthily detailed in a horse server she was trying to farm points using an exploit. An exploit that was banned in the server, purely thinking she wouldn't be caught because she could respond with a few presets in the chat to the admins, who, as she described, got repeatedly suspicious and started noticing she was performing the exploit and wanted to know if she was actually human and not a bot, and complained that they dared to ask her to verify herself when they don't even know her. She explains they said something extremely rude meant for private chat in the open by accident, however due to the extremely biased way she's writing this, you can easily assume they were using a firm tone in the server. Humorously, their warnings for said Minecraft server are public, and there she is, right at the end, listed as being given a warning due to performing the exploit against the rules of the server. She admits to this, however has no concept of the idea that she actually broke rules and it was her fault for doing this, yet she is heaped tons upon tons of praise for dealing with the big bad admins by everyone else in the server, despite that she clearly explained she broke the rules. This caused me to leave. I'm not about to deal with individuals who are so far into their safe spaces they have no concept of the idea that as humans, you make mistakes, and if they are your fault, and it is a fault of anything, you are to own up to it. Her rewards of praise from the admins who blindly praised her, no critical thinking involved, were unjustified and lazy. The last place with questionable people promoting toxic positivity is webkinstown.ca, a forum that I had to fall down a rabbit hole to find. Lots of fan sites surrounding the game are either dead or extremely closed off. This was one of the latter. You straight up can't view anything except the rules when you join. Now, as pro boards, I believe you have to be 13 or older to join. No child is going to find this. Despite this, the forum was using extremely antiquated rules such as YouTube links needing to be approved before posting. You also had to clumsily upload to another image hosting site in order to post images in threads. Links to anywhere even Webkinz related websites were banned. However, their rules were simple enough. I've saved the page in the Wayback Machine because they had an extra set of rules that they acted on when they felt like it because they were not written down and in my opinion for good reason. Their first rule was simply no scamming. Simple enough. Second was no talk of trading outside the trading area. Otherwise it's simple stuff. Post in the correct section, make sure you're over the age of 13, this is extremely important, and no bad words or images. Simple enough. So I posted here. The amount of sections they have, despite large, were remarkably restrictive, which I didn't think much of since I could still post some things. Oftentimes they would post threads where they stroke each other's egos, often with polls with 3 of the results biased in favour of one person, then it would get repeatedly awkward. Sometimes situations popped up where I then explained what I understood about the game to people, and this then got perceived as rude, despite that I never insulted anyone, nor did I try to say anything more than my opinions on how certain things are run. Oftentimes I would have critical opinions of things that people would consistently label me rude for, despite all I was doing was criticising the game and not anyone on the site. Things started going awry when they made giveaways, put a ton of trash items in a room to give out to those who want them. I was unclear with the item I requested, and thus that was on me. However, I tried to clarify I meant the rarer item that couldn't already be won on the wheels when I was asking for an item. They had a temper tantrum over me even mentioning such a thing, and this started a long downward spiral, culminating in some very recent events. One of the users was complaining they tried clearing their cache in regards to Webkinz for an issue related to the game's code, as back in 2008 it was an often stated recommendation by the customer support to clear your game's cache. However, nowadays, and especially considering updates to the game since, the game is constantly automatically refreshing. You can see this in developer tools to provide you with hundreds upon thousands of files every single second relating to what your pet is wearing and what you are currently doing. The game is auto-saving and refreshing itself constantly to the point it can sometimes hiccup certain arcade games while you're playing them due to the amount of picture files loaded at once for the sidebar. Whatever is in the cache is constantly getting updated, if anything because the entire site runs through an SWF file with a bunch of miniature other SWF files, which is constantly updated roughly every month. So the cache should be entirely forgotten about when it comes to information related about the site, because whatever is being stored is completely irrelevant given the internet and the way the game is structured nowadays. I even searched my entire computer for any mention of these files in any app data directories or anywhere, and there were none. The cache stores files locally for you to access when you're loading familiar web pages. This is how some people manage to find assets for the clinic and Maze and Hamsters, both retired areas of the site that are not there anymore, because they had found their cache on older computers from older browsers running the site. Nowadays, the cache for the game is all but irrelevant. If it's a bug, it's an issue with the game itself, as Aspidistra so kindly mentioned. As soon as I described this to them, They reacted so terribly you'd swear I dropped an actual chemical on them. They were about to run a day, like the actual game, where they give you an item for free. No questions asked if you just add it to your cart and call it a day. You're only supposed to have one per account, however. The previous promotion they did this was for a pair of slippers that they didn't cap the limit on the button, and so we ended up with way more slippers than was allowed. Sadly, because of the way the item is coded, I couldn't send the duplicates to anyone else. Some users, such as a user on Webkinz News named Alucard, will complain about this, which I agree with, though they will be met with hordes of people still thinking the game is relevant in the current day and age by having an economy that has no real value since it's all a virtual world at the whims of the company they shill to death. So the forum members post about this, and I decide to make a joke in good faith. I will spell out exactly what I said on the forum to you, here and now. Let's hope they patch. Oh, who am I kidding? I'm sure we'll be able to dupe them again. Haha. I want you to bring to mind their 6th rule on the site, and last rule was no bad words or images. Now, the way I worded this was extremely poor. I should have put item in the place of them, as I was merely informally using the word dupe as to mean duplicate, a la Gmod. It's also the 2nd definition on Google, Wikidictionary, and even has its own article on Wikipedia related to video games. Someone reported the post for being rude, and they censored it off the forum. It wasn't aimed at any member, nor any staff member behind the game as an insult, though they were absolutely not in any capacity viewing this forum due to how obscure it is. And here I only have a few logs from the administrator who PM'd me about it. She repeatedly said this was against the rules, despite that the rules do not mention you cannot joke about or even mention exploits in the game, which is especially egregious given when the game got hacked recently, the administrators had no qualms posting about 15 articles all related to reporting the incident without failure, which all reported to a flaw in the parents area, which given it is still relevant in the functionality of the current site since it included everyone's usernames and passwords, the latter of which were encrypted, of a whopping 23 million as reported by some sites. I had gotten the hold of the file myself. I have no ability to decrypt any of these passwords and have no intentions to. However, everyone's usernames are in plain text and contains every single username present on the site when the exploit happened, which was extremely recently given all my friends and even the staff's accounts were all there in plain text to be found with Control F. No censorship there. Her first message was telling me that if I had any questions that I should let her know as to why my post got deleted. But she didn't actually mean that, because when I defended my stance because I wasn't insulting anybody or using any nasty words, she got extremely sissy and then demanded it wasn't open for debate anymore, despite in the official terms of service for pro boards, of which this forum was hosted with, that if you have any grievances with administrators that you are to take it up with them, which she was. She then calls me rude and churlish for the last time for daring to speak up against this censorship of a sarcastic joke, claims this forum wasn't meant for me, and then bans me right on the spot for daring to speak up. They tried so hard to make this site for children, despite that children legally cannot join their website, and all of them are on a forum, which is supposed to promote discussion. Discussion includes negative aspects and viewpoints, including criticism. But because they refused to take me anymore, they entered their own hypocrisy and lullabied themselves to sleep. I also want to mention they tried so hard to make their site for kids, despite the extremely obtuse layout of the site with duplicate threads and boards, such as the fact there are 2 I adopted a new pet boards, one indented into the other, no proper segregation, no, straight up 2 boards with the same name, for kids. As well, during spring they changed the theme of the site to include an emoji of a rabbit on its hind legs shaking its ass and twerking. For kids, I'm sure. They never said so, but because I dared to stand for my rights to goddamn joke about an exploit present in the game that she feigned ignorance about, I've no idea what you're talking about, that I was promoting negativity, and that's no good, despite what they're doing is actually the opposite of what you want. There is so little constructive thinking with the people that surround the game nowadays, and thus no one is allowed to say what they truly think because of some facade people must put up. Klonoa 2 is a game that I never played that has this exact moral in its story. And for a more commercial example that I bet they'd have all seen, Pixar's Inside Out also featured a similar story where they teach you sadness is an okay part of life and to accept it. The irony being it wasn't even negative initially. I got reported because someone got offended that something that didn't even exist to be offended by because they weren't the target of a sarcastic joke. This is why it's extremely difficult for me to talk about the game nowadays, because all I see on the Twitter are the social media team trying desperately to quell misinformation and purely forcing a positive atmosphere into everything, when that does the opposite of growth for something that is still struggling so hard to find its footing in the modern day world. where the world has looked it on by and the only ones that remain feel they need to make everything and everyone into a hive mind so it'll never die, when I would think it would die quicker due to that. Restrict what people are allowed to say, censor them, bias specific individuals. It all adds up and creates an extremely toxic environment where you can never discuss with anyone what you truly think, because if it's outside of the narrow range of what's considered acceptable in maladjusted young adults or even grandmothers' brains, it's your fault. Even if you technically did nothing wrong, not once in my time on Webkinz Town or Kinscord, even the trade, did I ever swear or insult anyone. I never personally made you lesser by simply stating the truth or an opinion or anything that didn't fit into the hive mind. That was on you for trying so hard to control everything. You're now a dictator instead of a welcoming leader. And that's pretty much everyone nowadays. There's no community left on Webkinz that has any level of critical thinking going on, despite these people are grown-ups who can actually be allowed to state their opinions, and it's okay to like it despite its flaws. I say as a player with far too much time on her hands. But enough of the facade! You can be happy, but just being happy is not human. It's not in human nature. Negativity is an inherent part of life, and criticism comes with that. And I would like to think even the youth, the target demographic for this game, even though I would be very suspect if a lot of them are even playing the game nowadays, would know about that.